here, so thanks for joining me. So, I came to a point in my real estate investing career where the banks were now saying no to me because I had, I don't know, four mortgages, maybe five, including my personal property, and I was getting low on money to put down as a deposit, right? So, if you're familiar, the banks look at your debt servicing ratio, DCR. And, for some of you, that might be two mortgages. For others, it might be 10 mortgages, but you get a debt servicing ratio that once you kind of get above 40 to 45, you get north of that, banks get nervous to start lending to you. Hey, Kenny, welcome. And so the other aspect of it is for people who just have got bad credit, right? Investors can have bad credit just like anybody else, and you might be new into investing, and maybe you're just poor at mismanaging your money, and you learn some hard lessons, or you're newer to the country, you're still establishing credit, but the banks won't lend you money, and that's okay. We're all in those spots. We all can be in those spots, and so when you hit a wall, and this is what some of my first coaches taught me was that every investor will hit that wall at some point where they run out of their own money. They'll run out of their own money or their own credit. The banks just won't lend to them anymore. So, I was at that spot. I think I was at five doors, and I couldn't get any more mortgages. And I was very frustrated because I loved what I was doing. I had a couple of duplexes, and I just wanted to keep going. In fact, so much that I wanted to quit my day job and not become a realtor, not become a trade. I wanted to become a full-time real estate investor where all I did was what I was doing as a side gig, right? After work, lunch hours on weekends, and I wanted to go full-time. So that's when I remembered the rent own strategy. And so I'm not going to talk a ton about rent own today, but this is just kind of how I got here. So I remember one of my early workshops that I went to, they talked about rent own being a great strategy because you can get money up front. You get higher monthly cash flow than a typical buy, rent, and hold. And you can potentially do them as no money down deals, right? So back in 2010, when I'm starting to think about quit my day job and I can't get any more mortgages, my memory starts recalling stuff as I think through everything that I've done, everything I want to do. And so long story short on that, I hired a coach and I did my first rent own deal. You've probably heard that story before. But the important thing in that was leading up to that moment, I had friends who were like, we really like what you're doing with real estate investing. Um, could we invest with you? We don't know anything about how to start, where to start, how to look for deal, all this sort of stuff, but you seem to be doing well with it. And we'd love to partner with you and use some of our money so that we can get a return and you can profit from it as well. So that was the start of my first no money down deal. At the time I didn't know it because I was just excited about real estate investing. So I would just talk about it, right? Whenever you're excited about something, if you come off a weekend where you did something that you didn't, haven't done before, like you went race car driving, you went skydiving, you went fishing and you caught an amazing amount of fish. You met someone that you've wanted to meet your entire life. When you get back to the office, back to work on Monday, what are you going to talk about? You're going to talk about that experience that you had, right? So that really was my life for a number of years. Not every Monday when I got back to work, but lots of times, talking about a house that I picked up or renters and getting paid, all that sort of stuff, and people were taking notice. And so what I realized, what I was doing was I was giving my elevator pitch without even knowing it. And the elevator pitch is simply you sharing something about what you do that makes people more interested to hear more, but you're not actually making a pitch where you say, "Do you want to invest with me?" So it's just really straightforward. It's you're just talking about it, and people want to hear more, right? So you guys all know this. And so, anyways, I ended up doing that, and I put together my first rent-own deal, which was a no money down deal. Okay, so let me pause there and kind of shift gears. So now today, 11 years out from 2010, when I did my first no money down deal, as well as my first rent-own, I did those at the same time. Um, what I've realized in that time is that really I work with two different types of investors consistently. Now there's others, but I can boil it down to these two, which help me to do no money down deals. So if you've got a pen or you're at your computer or whatever, or on your phone, take a couple notes, keywords to help you remember, jog your memory, because this will help you as you're going forward. So the two types of investors are, the first one is much like the first investor I talked about, they're friends, right? Whether if it's friends or family, or friends of friends. And really, what they are is they are working professionals. So they are individuals who have got a decent income. They likely already have a mortgage, but maybe not. But they've got enough of down payment for a mortgage, and they can qualify for a mortgage, right? So they can qualify for another property, assuming that they have. Now, I would say most of my working professional investors who invest with me um, already have a property, but I do have some where they're younger and they make really good income, but they don't want to buy their own place yet for any number of reasons. Maybe they're living in downtown Vancouver or downtown Toronto or whatever, or they're in between houses, whatever. But so that's my first type of investor. So really, what I do is I present properties to these people, and they invest with them. And what they like about it is that first of all, obviously they gotta trust me and what I'm doing. Secondly, they gotta understand what they're investing in, right? So I try to make that crystal clear and really simple. I need to. They also like it because they don't get any phone calls from the tenants. They don't have to unplug toilets if the rent is late. They don't have to worry about that. Right? That's all what I do. If you're familiar with corporations or when people do raising funds for a capital project, there's called the managing partner and the equity partner. So I'm talking about the equity partner where my investor physically purchased the home. Now I do all the due diligence for them on the property because I'm the managing partner, right? So I'm putting myself on the line for that deal as well. So it becomes a really good 50-50 joint deal that we do together. So, my investors are generally very happy with how these work out. They get great returns on them, and it becomes a turnkey investment for them, right? So that's one of the ways that I structure my no money down deals. So hopefully that makes sense. If that if you got questions on that particular one, just uh, put it in the comment section, and start it with what did I call them? Working professional investor. So put in working professional investor, and then your question. What is your question specifically on that? Because when I come back to this and I read the live comments, if you're only commenting to what I spoke to, I won't necessarily remember exactly what I was talking about the moment that you wrote that. So yeah, so put that in there, please. And so before I go into the second investor type that I work with to get a no money down deal, just want to say, as you know, this is free content. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a financial advisor. So anything that I say is based on my own experience for myself and experience that I've seen with my students. If you go out and do any of this stuff, please talk to your lawyer, talk to your accountant, and do your own due diligence. It's very important that you always do your own due diligence, right? So, and also with that, this is free content. If you found any value in this, please invite one other person that you know to this group, right? This is the Rento and Real Estate Investing Group. Invite one other person to it, like this and share it with someone. I would really appreciate that. So want to get the word out there and build this rent-own community for everyone who's interested in rent-own and no money down deals and creative investments. So, all right. So the next piece, the other investor that I work with is what I call the tired and frustrated landlord. So TFL. If you followed me for any period of time, you will have heard me talk about a TFL. And TFLs are basically people who already own the property, but you get involved and you help solve their headache and you have a property for yourself. So a little bit later on, I'm going to talk about some of the benefits of both of these and some of the practical applications, practical exit strategies that you can do. But in terms of TFLs, they are everywhere, and I mean everywhere. And so I've had people say, well, I don't think there's really any TFLs in my area because they're not, they don't have FSBO signs up for sale by owner and they don't have ads up, right? Well, that's exactly the point. These are tired and frustrated landlords. When you're tired and frustrated of doing something, let's say trying to figure out a new program on your computer, and you've been working at it for weeks and even months and just not getting into the success, what are you typically going to do? Are you going to ramp up your energy and start trying to attract people to help you? Or are you going to kind of go, man, I just don't even want to think about this anymore, right? My experience is the latter. The problem is that, a computer program is, free or $5 or maybe $500 or more. Um, you can let go of that. Whereas a property is like, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, and if you're not looking after it, it's going to cost you money that comes out of your pocket, right? Taxes, insurance, upkeep, maintenance, all that sort of stuff. And so these people are not, the tired and frustrated landlords are not actively out there promoting themselves. And so that's where our opportunity comes in to find these people, to seek them out. And so I'll talk a little bit in a bit about how to seek those people out. Let me take a drink of water. You know what? I've got my wrong microphone. Bear with me 3 seconds. Hopefully this is better. All right, just give me a thumbs up or thumbs down if the sound is better because of this microphone. Hopefully it is. All right, so the tired, frustrated landlords, we're not finding them because of their advertising. We're finding them because we're going out there and looking. So about a year into doing my first rent-own deal, and then after that, I did 4 more that in that same year, all no money down. I had other investors invest with me and friends of friends and all that sort of stuff, some family. And so I was looking for my next deal and I was hunting and I found an opportunity on, I think it was Kijiji at the time. Maybe it was Craigslist, I'm not sure. And the opportunity was there that this house was in really rough shape, and the person involved with it was looking for a creative way out of the deal. And so I reached out, I did a little bit of research, and I found out who owned the property. And this is a guy I'd never met, but I knew of him. Most investors in my circles knew of this guy because he had a ton of properties. And so I reached out to him and said, hey, I'd be interested in have a look at your property. Would you be interested in me renting it for 3 years and then buying it off of you at the end of that? And so obviously it was a little bit longer conversation with that, but he said yes. We sat down and went over the paperwork and he signed it. We talked through it and we signed it. And so that was my first TFL that I worked with. And from there, 5 days later, he shoots me a text and goes, "Hey, I've got three more properties. Would you be interested in doing these with me? Same as what we did that first one." And I was like, "Yeah, I would be very interested in that." And so I did it. I did those next properties. And so with that one individual, I think I've done about 22 properties, taking them off his hands. And I've done, oh man, I would venture to say over 50 properties like this the where essentially it was a tired and frustrated landlord where they already own the property and I came in and basically took over the property on their behalf. I still paid them what they needed each month to cover their mortgage, taxes, and insurance. But then I looked after the property, and so my exit strategy with that was any number of things, whether it was putting a rental client into it, or wholesaling the deal, or adding it to my portfolio as a straight rental. Also, I've done flips this way where I've taken the house from a tired, frustrated landlord, put in reno work and some sweat equity on some projects, others fully hired out, and then turned around and sold it on the open market and made a profit. And so these are all ways that I have found to work with tired and frustrated landlords. So the thing is that they're everywhere, and you just got to go out and find them, right? So if I've done north of 50 of those in the last 10 years with tired and frustrated landlords, and I've been doing other real estate, um, projects as well, developments and multifamily builds, and so I haven't just been focusing on rent-own all these years, but there's so much opportunity out there. So it's about finding them. So let me kind of pause it there. What sort of questions do you have? Any questions for me on this stuff, or is it making sense? Just let me know if it's making sense, or if you've got a specific question about the two different types of investors that I work with to structure a no money down deal. Now, let me talk about a third way. If you've got a question, write it down. Oh, here we go. I see some questions. Cool. So the third way I've done it, and this is, I don't know if this is more advanced, it's just different. But I've had properties where I found a tired and frustrated landlord, and they didn't want to do any financing with me. They didn't want to do any vendor takebacks, mortgages, right? VTBs. They didn't want to hold any financing, all that sort of stuff. Um, so what I did was I fully funded it 100% with OPM, other people's money. And so, let's just say I picked up a group of homes, three homes, and I'll just use round numbers for this scenario. Pick them up for 100 grand each. Some of you go, that's really cheap. Other of you will go, it sounds about right. And others of you go, that's a bit high, depending on where you're located. Numbers are just numbers. They're only relative to their own markets, right? So don't compare yourself with other people in other markets. Um, so what I did with that is, so I need to come up with 300,000 cash to buy this property. And typically, when you're doing, flips on vacant properties, traditional banks will not lend to you. Now, if you've got a massive line of credit and you just use that line of credit, that's different. But to get a mortgage, not so much, right? So typically, when you're doing deals like this, you got to come up with cash. So we were able to negotiate. So my partner and I on this one, we were able to negotiate a smoking price on these three properties, and let's just say that the guy was asking 140, and they were probably worth about 140, but we got them for 100 each, right? And so we were able to close this deal in 2 weeks. From the time that we first met him to when we actually took possession was 2 weeks. And so we just borrowed cash from, I've got a couple different people that lend and are very comfortable with lending to me and my partner, and basically able to structure a deal that way because I know exactly what this lender is looking for security, and what sort of parameters he's looking for, timeline, all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of like, back in my day job, what I used to do was, when I had to go to my boss and get something approved, I knew my boss well enough to know what sort of questions he was going to ask. And so, really, what I did was I answered all those questions before I met with him, so that the meetings would be pretty short and to the point, and I could knock it out of the park and get that approved, right? So same with my lender now. It's like I know what my lenders are looking for, and so I when I shoot them a text or an email, I pre-answer all their questions. Now they may come back with some questions, that's fine, or a phone call, but oftentimes these get approved via text. On it. So, anyways, long story short on that, the whole thing with this was a no money down deal where I raised 300 grand cash plus closing costs to buy it with none of my own funds, and then turn around and sell them in a period of time where I made profit. So these particular ones, we just kind of cleaned them up, didn't really do any rentals, and we just market them to other flippers as flip deals for them. So I was able to turn around and make a fairly decent amount of money on that. Um, and so the point is that's a different way that you can do a no money down deal, right? And so there's all these different ways you can do it, and which is just fantastic. So let me respond to a couple of these questions here. So Kenny asks, anytime I bring this up to potential sellers, I feel like they have no idea what I'm talking about or act like they're going to get burned. Okay. Do you have any suggestions on how to introduce this concept in some way to less savvy owners? Awesome question, Kenny. Um, yes, absolutely. Basically, what you need to be able to do is you need to be able to explain what you're doing to a 5-year-old. And that really just comes through practice. And so it means that, even though you're nervous, maybe you're not nervous, but, apprehensive about going out there and knocking on doors and talking to people based on what they're going to say, that's really the stuff you got to go through um, to gain that experience, right? Because we could sit here for hours just talking about what are all the potential questions and hesitations people might have, and that's good. Role playing is good for sure, but until you actually get the real questions, that's what you find the real answers for yourself. And so, role playing with other people is good. What I've done also is I've asked people who are, you know, business minded, and get them to sit down with me, and I basically just ask them to role play with me, and I go through my whole pitch, and they can ask whatever questions they want and any objections they want, and that's a safer environment to do that, and you'll get really good feedback from that and good response. But I find the best is just by taking real life action and finding owners of properties, responding to ads, calling FISBOs, calling for rent by owners as well, but just taking action going in that. And what that'll do is it'll prepare you for um, when people have real objections. And so, one key thing I always tell my students is, you know what? Don't fake it till you make it. Don't go out there and say, someone asks you a question, you come up with some sort of, BS answer, and most of the time people can read into that and they just go, I don't know if I trust this guy. That just didn't seem real or legit, right? So, uh, my wife really pushed me on the fake it till you make it stuff. She says, no, let's be real. And so, what I do is at any time, even today, because I still have people asking me questions I don't have answers to. So rather than fake it till I make it, I'll say, that's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that. Let me find out and I'll get back to you. So that does two or three things right there. One, it builds some sincerity, some honesty, and which turns into rapport, right? Because you want to be building rapport with anybody that you're selling to, or that you want to buy from. And secondly, it gives you another automatic touch point with them in the future where you go back and you find out the answers to that, and then you can come back. And then now you're being legit because you have, said, oh, let me go find out an answer and I'll get back to you. Because 9 times out of 10, people don't follow up when they say they're going to do. They're going to say, people will say, yep, let me get back to you. And they never do. But here's an opportunity for you to do that. So that ups your trust factor. And then from there, it also is like, wow, this person got back to me. Another touch point, another spot to build rapport. So that's what I would say. And really, Kenny, that's just something that again is best by going out there and doing it. So I can remember one of the first investor that I found off of Kijiji, where I made my pitch. I made a pitch over the phone, and I got them to the point where they said, "Yep, let's talk." Met at the property. I brought my contracts, walked through the contracts, and went pretty good. But in the end, I made one comment that I totally blew it, and I knew as soon as it came out of my words, like that did not sound good. It did not what I intended, and it didn't sound good. And so, long story short, they didn't do it with me. But the lesson I learned from actually doing that was invaluable, right? So I've gone on to close deals since then, like that. So yeah, so that's hopefully that's helpful, Kenny. And let's see here. All right, Monica. Um, Heard a good tip. Improv classes will allow you to quickly train on your feet. Yeah. Train your brain quickly to come up with a response. Absolutely. If you're a fan of The Office, Michael Scott was a master of improv, and but it's true. But it's like role playing as well. So improv is great. You can also just you can Zoom with somebody. You can Zoom with someone that you met in a Facebook group that you think you might align a bit on what you want to do, and say, hey, can we role play as investors? Here's what I'm trying to accomplish. I'm trying to get over some fears of knocking on doors with homeowners that need to sell their properties, and could you role play for me? So that is a great idea. And Kenny says, adding more value besides solving their main issue, to get out of the asset. Okay, awesome. That's good. Yeah, I mean, you know what? That's one of the biggest things I'd say with when you're trying to buy off someone and they've got a headache problem, is really taking the time to listen to what their problems are. And 9 times out of 10, they won't be able to articulate very well what their actual problem is. But if you're listening, you'll be able to pull out key points, right? Key points of what they're talking about, and know that those are their pain points. And so you can repeat back to them. So if I understand you right, Bob, I hear what you're saying is that you're just tired of dealing with tenants. Um, you're not so concerned about selling your house right now because you don't really need the cash flow. You don't really need the money from it. But you would still really like to keep the property, but still have some cash flow from it. Is that fair? And we'll say yes or no. And so that's leading into an awesome partnership where they hold the property, but you become their tenant, and then you rent it out to somebody else, and you make profit from that deal. So, all right. So let's see here. Jacques says you took a mortgage after 3 years. You said you could not do the banks. Okay, great question. So keep in mind there's so many different ways that you can structure these deals, right? So I've had a duplex that I rented to own to another investor. So I owned it, and I was looking to get out of it for a couple of reasons. But I had an investor, excuse me, someone that I knew who was an investor who couldn't get any more properties right now, and so we did up the paperwork, and they became my tenant buyer. But I knew they weren't living in it; they were going to rent it out the two sides of the duplex, and he's going to pay me rent every month. And so in 3 years, he was in a much better position. He could then qualify for a mortgage. Okay, so that's one way to build your portfolio, is exactly like that, where you qualify for the mortgage after 3 years. A lot of times, what I do when I acquire these homes is I will put a qualified rent to own client into it, right? A tenant buyer, and that's a whole nother subject. But basically, what I'm doing is I'm helping those families get into home ownership, but I'm doing it with a house that I don't technically own. Like, I'm not on the mortgage, and I didn't have to come up for down payment. And so for me, that's a great strategy because I can make, anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 on that deal over the 3 years without having to qualify for the mortgage or have a down payment. And I've got someone else who owns the property for me, right? So that means I'm able to scale very quickly. Like when you go to a bank, right now it's taking weeks, sometimes months to get approved by a bank, depending on your bank, all that sort of stuff. Um, but in this scenario, you can do one a week if you want to. You can do one a day if you want to, as long as know your exit strategy and your cash flowing okay. But so yeah, Jacques, I hope that helps in terms of I don't always look for a mortgage on these afterwards, right? So for my buy, rent, and holds, yes, I've got mortgages on those. But oftentimes when I'm structuring these no money down deals as rentals, uh, as rent owns, I'm not getting the mortgage for those, right? So here's several ways, several exit strategies that you can do with no money down deals, right? So first of all, you can do it for yourself if you're trying to get into the next property, right? Find a no money down deal where someone buys a house for you, or they already own it, or you can turn around and put a rent-owned client in it and generate cash flow for yourself. You can turn around and just wholesale it to somebody else, right? Depending on the timing, and the market. And um, another one that I've done fairly often is I'll do a flip in a no money down deal, right? Whether sometimes I will get an investor to buy the house for me, we'll flip it. But the really sweet way to do it is where I find a tired and frustrated landlord, and I secure the property with my paperwork. I give them a check for $100, make it a legally binding agreement, and then I'll get in the property and I'll do a flip on it, right? And then I'll turn around and sell that either on the open market or privately. So, people will do flips and they'll talk about making, X amount, whatever's good. 15,000 on a flip is good for one person, where others won't touch it unless they make north of 30 after all expenses, right? Excuse me. So depending on what your numbers are, this is a great way to do it because again, you're not qualifying for mortgages, and most of the time when people are doing flips, they're doing hard money, right? Because they're typically not getting the traditional mortgage from the bank to do the flip. And so hard money means that they're spending on average 10% on the money that they borrow, right? So that gets pretty rich. Whereas when I do this way with a tired and frustrated landlord, I am paying just like I would be using hard money, but I'm not paying 10%. I'm actually paying less than that. All right. Well, I'm going to be wrapping this up here in a few minutes. Any last questions for me today? I do have a couple things I want to show you, but let me answer this question. Maybe it's not a question; it might just be a comment. Kenny replies to Jacques, I believe at the point when the owner sells it to you, they'll take on the mortgage because you skip the qualifying part, basically. Yeah, that's one way to do it. There's multiple ways to do it. So you might want to know, how do you go out and find these? I mean, that's maybe the biggest question here. How do you find these properties? So there's two ways that you can find them. Well, no, there's a whole bunch. I'm gonna share a couple with you. Give me a second here. Just waiting for the other question to come in. So one way that I've had a lot of success with And I've got a student of mine out in the Okanagan who's actually doing something just like this now, dropping these in mailboxes and knocking on doors, drop them in mailboxes. So this is a great form because it looks like it's handwritten, but this is actually just photocopied. And this has been awesome, right? So as you know, if you've been in sales at all before, you know that you can't drop this note in once and expect people to call you. Sometimes they do, but oftentimes they don't. And I go into multiple ways on how to do this in terms of capturing people's attention, because what do they say on average people need between 7 and 12 contacts to actually buy or sell, right? So I've got a whole kind of sequence that I do these on. The other way is I've got what's called my how to find tired and frustrated landlords. Let's see here we go. So I'm going to drop the link to that. Oops, nope. I'm going to drop the link of that in here. Okay, there we go. So I've dropped the link in there. You can download for free my TFL ebook, which talks about, basically it goes in deeper into depth how to find these tired and frustrated landlords. So yeah, I hope that you found some value today. Again, please share this with somebody else. Hit the like button, make a comment. If you learned something, what did you learn? If you have any questions, if you didn't learn something, make a comment. Let me know. Let me know how I can improve them. And yeah, I'm so grateful for those of you who jumped on this live call today. I will make this available on our group on Facebook as well as the YouTube channel. So, hey, have an awesome day. Thanks so much for joining in.